Hi, I'm Mitchell,
Hi, I'm Jeremy.
and this is Board Game Battle. We're here to distill your arguments and ultimately to crown a winner by awarding them the Golden Meeple based on your votes. In case you forgot, our debate this last week was
Best worker placement.
my choice was After the Empire.
And mine was Everdell.
There he goes, put it in front again. All right, I've got some comments, mostly from the YouTubes. From Carlos, we got a comment that says, cubes for the soldiers are difficult to balance on the wall. He's agreeing with Jeremy in a counter argument to After the Empire. He also said Jeremy is correct. Rules bloat is bad. Basically, I had said, well, just because there's a lot of rules in the game doesn't mean it's bad. And Jeremy was like, actually, yes, it does. Doesn't necessarily mean he was going for the other game, though.
I definitely think it's points in Everdell's column.
Go on.
So, I have a comment here from Carla. Man, I feel like this wasn't a fair battle. Sure, they're both worker placement, but outside of that, they feel wholly different to me. Especially for me, because I'm such a visual and immersive gamer that's not big on conflict. Me either, Carla. So Everdell is an insta-win for me, but I can totally see how After the Empire would definitely be of a higher interest for other gamers because of the interactability and also those turning cards seem like a really cool mechanic. They are a really cool mechanic. But that is the awesome thing about board gaming. Not every shoe has to fit every foot.
That's true. And hey, if you're a visual gamer, have you seen those castle pieces in After the Empire? They're like the definition of aesthetic. Anyway, next we've got a comment from Ryan, which if you didn't know was one of the co-designers of the game. So first of all, Ryan, thank you so much for interacting with our video. I really appreciate it. I'm sure Jeremy does as well. I don't know why I said I instead of we, but yeah. He said, I'm heavily biased, but all about After the Empire myself. I don't think there's anything wrong with being biased here, dude. You guys created a great game. I would be proud of it if I were you as well. I love Everdell as well. I own it in multiple expansions, but would still prefer a game of After the Empire any day. Same here, Ryan. Same here.
Yeah. So, this next comment comes from my wife, actually, so it shouldn't really be included, but I'm going to because we both love the game. So she commented saying that I didn't talk about the lore or the flavor text, but that she loves those features in the rulebook and on the cards. Really, really, really excellent artwork, and then also the lore and the story that's behind Everdell. Cor and Evertail settled underneath the Evertree to make a new home for all of these critters. It's a pretty fantastic story.
Give me game, not story. Anyway, the Luminous Cleric said, you don't actually have to use the tree. Also with the Belfair expansion, you simply replace the tree with the market board. Because I was complaining about how you couldn't see on the tree and things were falling off. This actually is more of a con, in my opinion. Sorry, Cleric, or the Luminous, whatever your name is. I'm paying for a component that I don't use.
Yeah, no, I think the tree is probably one of the best things in the game. It's the centerpiece of your game. But, yeah, some of the expansions like Belfair do remove the tree, and that, to me, is kind of a downside. But
to be fair, I never have played the expansion, so, yeah. We got another comment?
Yeah, so our next comment comes from the other co-designer of the board game, After the Empire, Evan Halbert. Awesome to be included in the conversation with such a great game as Everdell. Thank you, guys. Well, thank you for commenting on our video.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. All right. John Lanyo, who was the guy that was on last week, said he's going with Everdell because it's more aesthetic, which, John, that was last week, the debate. Aesthetic game. This is something different. Move on, man. You lost, okay? Move on.
So our last comment here comes from the
ballad.
The ballad. And this comes from Connor. I've always enjoyed playing both, but Everdell has more in common with games I enjoy, such as Tapestry, Scythe, etc. Hopefully those etc. are more Everdell.
Yeah, so that's the end of the comments and things that we'll be reading. There was definitely a lot of outspoken commentary in favor of Everdell. So does that mean that Everdell's going to win? Or maybe the After the Empire people are so confident they didn't need to give reasonings? We'll see. All right, Jeremy, you ready to hear the winner?
Sure.
The winner is...
After the Empire.
After the Empire. The Golden Meeple comes this way for After the Empire. And those of you watching at home, if you don't know who this is that just announced for us, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Evan Halbert. I am one of the two designers, along with Ryan Mock, on After the Empire.
That's really cool. You're our first guest, and we're just a little small YouTube channel, and you're helping bring us some legitimacy. I hope we don't bring down your legitimacy.
I'll do my best to shoot it this way rather than this way. We'll see how it goes.
For sure. So, Jeremy, feeling any pressure about facing down the co-designer of a game that you were on the other side of for our video last week?
A little bit. Just to be clear, I don't dislike After the Empire. I do enjoy the game, but if both of them were put on the table in front of me, I would pick Everdell.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, Everdell's a great game. I can't I can't fault you for that.
The way that he said it whenever we were texting about this, it's like, you said, like, I'm just a plebe talking about a game, and then we'll get the master on to tell me why I'm wrong.
That's right. That's right.
So what we're going to do, if it's...
I would be a patrician.
Yeah, right. Hey, I'm a history teacher, so I feel that.
Nice.
Yeah, so what we're going to do here is we're going to bring up each of the counter arguments that Jeremy brought up and give Evan here the opportunity to kind of rebut as well. So the first thing that you brought up was the fact that changing turn order could be a little confusing and things like that. So what are your thoughts on that, Evan? Was there ever a time whenever it was a round robin kind of game?
If there was, I'm not remembering it. If that was changed to that, it was like way long ago. That core element of, so like there's two things we've done in this game that are kind of different or new, right? We've got a pretty simple Euro game, which we kept intentionally simple because we have this possibly overwrought combat system, right? We wanted to abstract miniature combat on top of a Euro game. And so if you're going to have a complex combat system, I mean, it's not that complex compared to people who play miniature games, but for the average Euro gamer, it's a complex system for combat. So we put that on top of a very simple Euro game. So the other thing we did was we wanted to make victory points a resource, right? So not only, it's not just like, hey, gather the most victory points and then, it's a point salad at the end and you win, right? There's a little bit of that, but we wanted that to be something that you actually have agency over, where you're like, ooh, do I want to, give up those future points in order to duck under this threat level on this card? But I don't want to go too low because I still want the flag. Or should I give up that 1 point flag because I want to go first next turn because I think this card's going to be available? So we wanted that to add to the strategy rather than being like a static thing that just continues to go up and doesn't really play into the mechanics and thematics at all. And then the other thing was just like, how much gold you have should 100% affect how hard you're attacked.
You like thematic.
Sure, yeah, I agree.
The other side of it is there has to be some reason to have a slightly different approach to the game rather than just vying for those flags at that like perfect Goldilocks zone of like, well, it's high enough, it's higher than other people to get the flag, but it's not so high that I'll get sacked, right? Because that exists, that's there. But we also wanted to have the like, okay, well, I'm out this combat, right? I don't want to participate in this particular round because I'm not ready. So I'm going to drop down. I'm going to take that first action next round and then really hit it hard the next round.
Yeah, like you're saying, it allows for lots of different options, and I figured that out. My first couple plays of the game, I'm sure it's a natural thing. Like, yeah, just march up the victory point check, and then you're just getting destroyed, right? So like I was saying with Jeremy, kind of the reason I brought up as a big deal is this is the only worker placement game I can think of where it's actually a lot of times better to go last, so you can drop just under, so you don't get hit by that surge, and things like that. So, Jeremy, you have any counters to the counters?
No, I mean, I think that the first time that you and I played it, that's really how I played it. I tried to keep my points lower than yours or lower than the threshold, and yeah, I mean, it worked out well because I wasn't sacked at all on our first play. And then my second one against my wife, I got sacked 3 times. So
it's like almost 50%. But also, like Evan brings up, sometimes you're kind of just saying, yeah, look, I'm gonna say I'm not gonna focus on this combat. Not focus on it, but I'm going to take the sack and for a long-term benefit, and that adds to the replayability of it. I think is what you're saying basically, Evan.
Yeah.
All right. The next thing you brought up were the cards about which way they flip and all that.
Right. So the rule book does clarify a little bit, and I realized that after the fact that it does say it's relative to wherever the player is at the table, right? Which is great. I'm glad that it does that. The only concern I had was the other piece of that concern was that. So obviously the relativity on the positioning doesn't matter, but the icons that are on it are not omnidirectional, right? So knowing that there's, you know that there's a sword, that's your melee guy, you know that there's a bow and arrow, that's your ranged guy, but the numbers obviously are one direction or the other. So you sometimes may need another player further across the table to say, hey, this is 3 guys coming this way or this many.
Yeah.
So I was curious if there was a way to do, and this is maybe so just for me, because I like to look at board games and say, is there a way to remove all the text from this game and it's still playable, right? Can you do that without compromising the core of the game, of how that's presented?
To me, I don't think it's that big a deal because it's pretty much just numbers that you're looking at. I mean, maybe if it says leader or all. But
right.
Any comment on that, Evan?
If there, is a better way to get that information across without having to have one person kind of, tell somebody that's a little too far away, like, hey, it's the threshold is 24, you're getting hit. And you think of it, I would love to know if we have a second edition, like, yeah, let's clean that up and make it more perceivable from a distance so that you don't have to ask or check, but ultimately there's a lot of information to put on that card. I think we kind of did the best we could come up with as far as having it be legible from a distance. But yeah, like I said, if you come up with a good way, you let me know.
Sure.
That's a perfect counter. I would argue that, I mean, all tables are going to have some table management.
Right.
Everdell definitely has it as well with that tree,
Tree.
I really, really like the siege tracker as a way to prevent sandbagging. Jeremy, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that one, that's the thing that, like, I don't like any game that forces a minimum threshold on everybody, right? Like, so it's kind of, it's unfair to the players who decide to play more aggressively in terms of spending their points outright, but at the same time, I do understand. I understand why you can't just have them spend all their points down to 0 and then, surprise, surprise, they don't get hit at all. Because then they're just kind of going and going and going. Now, at the end of the game, they have no points, but they might have this great fortified city. It kind of leans into the fact that, like, so I have this thought about After the Empire, where you have all these different barbarians coming to destroy your castle, right? Did they ever get taxed? Like, there's got to be enough of them, right? There's only a finite number of people that can come and attack you. And I guess the theory is that, there's more coming from other continents,
This is him worrying about the whole mythos of the world.
Right, the theme of the game and, like, the story and the lore. And that was, that's another point I have altogether is that, it's... I don't know, and this is going to be one of our last things that we'll actually talk about, but and we'll delve into it a little bit more in depth later. But for me, aside from the quick little flavor text at the beginning and each of the houses being named, that's kind of it. Like, everything else you kind of have to generate in your brain on your own, or in your game on the table.
So was there a reason that you guys put in the siege tracker? Was there a problem that you had to fix, or was that just something that you liked from the beginning?
If I told you that it was always there and we didn't put it in for a mechanical reason, I would be lying, right? It's not just thematic, but it is thematic. It's, we are trying to create a scenario where you feel this ever increasing, combat, like round after round. You're like, oh my gosh. Okay, we survived that one. Oh my gosh, it's even more this time. Oh my gosh, it's even more this time, until it kind of crescendos at the end.
That kind of adds to the thematics in a way. It's impending doom,
I am
right?
inclined to agree with that. It just kind of circles back around to the, like, is there an end to the barbarians? Like, when they're hitting our walls, we're murdering them.
They were testing your metal, and then they realized, oh, all right, pretty formidable. We'll come back with the real crew next time.
There you go.
That's
I like
fair.
that.
So it's thematic because, it should be increasing throughout the game. At the beginning of the game, you're kind of learning how things are going. You can kind of handle the little easy onesie twosies, and then it kind of goes, oh my God. But if we let someone hang out at 0 the entire game, is it additional strategy? Possibly.
I think they would lose,
Totally.
wouldn't they?
However, you also are not engaging with the core conceit of the game, which is you have a Euro game mixed with a tower defense game. If you ignore the tower defense game and you just play a Euro game, then you're playing a very, I don't think it's bad, but it's very straightforward Euro game, right? There's nothing too crazy going on there. We've kind of kept it pretty meat and potatoes. there's a couple little things that are interesting and different, but for the most part, it's pretty meat and potatoes. And if you want to just play that game, I would go play Pillars of the Earth, man. It's awesome.
So yeah, and as you're talking about it, it actually makes me realize that there's even more strategy with it. I was playing a game yesterday with someone who wasn't Jeremy, and I was constantly trying to get just below him so that he would get the surge, but I would still be right up there. But there was a point toward in game where by getting below him, I was also getting below the siege tracker, and I was like, that's not worth it for me because I'm going to be dropping my score, but at the same time, I'm not going to be getting any benefit in terms of dropping down to a lower threshold. So it really adds a lot of levels.
Yeah. So basically, we want people to engage with the tower defense aspect of the game.
That's the thing that drew me and my wife to this game. When I first told her, hey, I want you to play this with me, she said, I don't know, but it looked a little too complicated. But as soon as I said tower defense, she's like, okay, that's it. Show me how to play.
So Jeremy's next counter argument was about like the bricks on the walls. Do you want to talk about that for a second?
Right. So there seems to be maybe it was a manufacturing issue, right? Maybe some of the wooden cubes are a little too big to fit into the holes. And then the soldier and the mercenary meeples, the cubes, they don't stay so well on the wall. You might be able to get 2, maybe 3 on there before they start falling off. It gets just a little fiddly.
So in the Kickstarter version, do those little standees, do they stay on a little bit better maybe?
The minis are a little easier to fit on the wall, and in the little space, the little groove that's on the inside of the curtain wall, but ultimately it's all a little bit fiddly. It just is. There were probably some production things that could have been tightened up. Gray Fox has kind of said as much in a few places, and not just on After the Empire. Like, there was kind of like a little run of production issues that occurred on things that were being designed and produced around that time. And obviously now moving forward, they're trying to move beyond that and do a closer look at those things before they head out. But yeah, it's a little bit fiddly. Though the upgraded cubes are actually a little bit smaller. Yeah. So they do fit better into those little sockets. And the plastic minis do fit a little easier on those walls. But at the end of the day, it's a little bit fiddly.
It usually only happens like in late game whenever I have a lot of workers, and we've kind of just house ruled it in our place that we kind of just put them in the courtyard, butting them up against the wall, which is not like a huge deal, just a slight easy fix.
Yeah.
So one of Jeremy's other counters was about IP. Was there ever any consideration to add any IP to this game, or is there a possibility maybe for a future reskin or something like that?
As a designer who is unpublished, your access to IP material is basically zero.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fair too. First time designer publisher, that's you don't really have the access to them, right? Once they know you can do stuff, then they're like, okay, well, what do you want to do with this?
And different publishers have different kind of tendencies towards seeking out IPs and not, right? Like Gray Fox doesn't do a lot of IP stuff. They kind of just do the game as it is, and because they like it and they think it's good, and they do it.
Right.
Other companies, like, most of their games are IP because that they seek those out and they do that on purpose. So there's kind of it's and ultimately that usually ends up not really being the designer's choice anyway.
Right.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
If you said to me before this was published, if you said, hey, I know somebody at Lucasfilm and they want this to be the attack on Hoth, right? You got your AT-ATs coming and your little troops coming in, and you got your 4 generators that you have to protect. If you told me you had that access and they wanted to work with us and it would be a decent deal, would I go for that increased marketing? Sure.
You sound like you don't have that on paper somewhere already. All the changes you'd need to make.
Oh, did I mock that up yet?
Yeah, I bet. Oh, and that would absolutely make it. So for me, it's, Mitchell has a copy of After the Empire. If I want to play it, I'm going to come play it with him, But if there were a Star Wars or a Lord of the Rings or a Game of Thrones themed one, I'd probably buy it in a heartbeat. There'd be no question about it. That would absolutely be something for me. Because I'm a very big theme and visual person, right?
That's why people go IPs, because you have that immediate onboarding and knowledge base of the consumer, right? You don't have to, it's not even like if I had made this art book and this big story book, how many people would really want to delve into that?
Right.
Sadly, 3%.
Right, it probably would.
Jeremy
be.
falls in that 3%.
I'm gonna be frank with you. Yeah, Simon struggles with that a lot too. They want to put out other things, right? They recently did their comics volume 1 for based off of their board games, and they're like, well, how are we going to get people to buy this? And the way that they did it was include miniatures for the board games with them. So yeah, no, I completely feel you on that. Putting out an art book is oftentimes a lot more work than it'll ultimately be worth.
But if I could tap into that automatic onboarding, you already know the lore, you already know the characters. If it's Star Wars or what have you, like, yeah, awesome. Plus, it's just fun to create in that world, right? Just as a designer, you get to like play with these things that people already are, interested in, and like bring your knowledge of that contextualization, of the game. And it probably would change a few mechanics, and you'd probably, add a few, like, well, we got to have force in there, obviously. You would probably change things a little bit, but that would be a fun process to kind of adapt to an IP. But at the end of the day, we didn't really have that access, and we never really thought about it. And so we kind of ended up with, admittedly, a pretty generic medieval setting,
which I think is fine, to be fair.
Sure, yeah. I mean, and there is nothing wrong with it as is. I think the only thing there is that you could be better, right, with more.
Totally.
Absolutely great game. I do enjoy it, and I will play it with Mitchell more because I have to beat him at some point.
The cool thing there going forward is, there's nothing stopping us from adding to the world and developing it if it does well enough to make that financially viable.
Right.
I think that'd be a lot of fun to really kind of develop that out and have more things happening. It would probably never really be like a novel about it, but just like little things here and there. We've already added some silly things in, but like some actual real setting things.
Gotcha.
Some things we can't really take back just because we thought they were fun.
Like what? What exactly are you referencing, if you don't mind my asking?
If you look at the quarry near the opening of the mine, you will see sitting up on the ledge a little guy dressed in quite a colorful outfit. That guy is called the Quarry Dude. He was in the game originally, but he came out because obviously Quarry Dude is anachronistic, right?
Like a refugee card?
Yeah. He doesn't fit in the setting because dudes didn't exist, and that outfit, I mean, yeah, maybe.
Was it a card that let you get more from the quarry or something like that? Was it one of those?
Yeah, but so what Grey Fox did is they did a lot of things to really keep our vision intact, even though our vision was dorky sometimes. So instead of saying you can't have a Quarry Dude in the game, like that just doesn't make any sense. Make it a stone cutter. And we're like, yeah, I know. It was one of the Kickstarter like bonus add-on cards.
Gotcha.
Nice.
Silly dressed Quarry Dude who gives you 2 extra stone every time you go to the quarry.
Yeah, so the other thing Jeremy brought up were concerns about color blindness with the different player tokens. Any thoughts on that?
No.
So, and in all fairness, a lot of developers don't think about it as one of the main things when they're picking their colors. I know that games like Reef, for example, its first printing had some, very colorful, bright, and, appealing colors. Second printing of it, they changed to be colorblind friendly.
Yeah.
It's always something I look for when I get a game to the table. I'm like, okay, how easy is it to distinguish the different colors? And green and blue in this game are very similar, especially against this very green and blue background.
Totally. Yeah, so actually Ryan, the co-designer, is one of the less affected colorblinds. So we actually do think about that. But at the end of the day, you have to kind of, when you send off a product to a publisher, they take care of it. And
Yeah.
you go, we think it should be white and black. And they're like, well, maybe we shouldn't.
Right, yeah.
You kind of end up where you end up. And I do think that, like a second printing might address that a little bit better. Because, I mean, you're not the only one to bring up any of these issues.
Issues is a strong word, right? So like when I played this with Mitchell, I'm not a big fan of pointing out all of the flaws in a game. I don't go, oh this, oh this, oh this. I enjoy the game while I'm enjoying it.
It's just kind of the MO of our channel is like trying to one up each other.
Right.
So yeah.
I have to find things. So you'll actually find when we did, all of his points, two of his I didn't have counterpoints when I was I like that. That's probably one of the better features of the game. Building the castles. That to me was a lot of fun. I'm a very visual and a tactile feedback kind of person. So any game that has pieces and chits that have some kind of texture. So the Kickstarter edition of this with the upgraded tokens, to me, that's going to be a must-have, for any play that I play of this.
The only thing I'll say is definitely do get the upgrade, but save your 3 times tokens.
Okay.
Because the little minis, they're just minis, right?
Oh, I didn't think about that.
Sometimes it's nice to be like, okay, there's 9 in just 3 chits, and then I'll grab...
That makes sense. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Although they do look, if you do all individual little plastic minis, they do look pretty impressive and cool.
Okay, so I think that's all the counter arguments. If it's cool, can we just ask you a few more questions not related to our video at all?
Totally.
So my first question, I saw a picture, I think it was on your website, of like a prototype version of it. It looked almost like the council pieces were made out of like paper from a long time ago. So I was just curious, were there any major mechanic differences from some other versions to the final version? And could you tell us maybe about some of those?
Yeah, so we started designing this like 7 years ago. And then we were going to self-publish it 3 years ago when, the owner of Gray Fox Games walked by our table and was like, what the heck's this?
Wow.
Have you ever thought about publishing this, through a publisher? And we were like, not really.
Was that at a con or something?
Yeah, we went Geekway to the West.
Okay.
Wandered by and was like, hey, that looks cool. So we were planning on doing it ourselves. But since when you work with a publisher, you go through a process called development. And a lot of people don't really know the difference between design and development. And it's tough to know because actually there's a lot of crossover and some people call one thing and the other thing. But generally speaking, design is what the designer does. The person who comes up with the idea or is commissioned to create the thing comes up with this thing, play tests it in a limited fashion on their own, makes it to a certain degree of reasonably done, depending on the publisher you're working with. Sometimes that's, 95%, sometimes that's 75%, and depending on how big of a name you are as a publisher or as a designer, sometimes that's, you kind of just, expectations are different case by case. But generally, you get it to a place where you're like, okay, this is a good game. And then the publisher says, okay, great. This is a good game, but it's not a game that fits in our catalog as well as we want, right? We need to maintain sort of this identity. So they might make certain changes that will fit within that identity. So if I get signed on by Smirk and Dagger, I don't know if you know Smirk and Dagger, but they do, it's all like, intrigue, backstabby, like there's gotta be player to player, like direct player to player interaction. So if you submit a game to them and they really want to do it, but it doesn't quite have enough of that, they might be like, hey, we like this game, but we're going to change it a little bit to get it a little bit more backstabby. Or, let's say you have another publisher who like their jam is medieval fantasy, right? Everything they put out, medieval fantasy, or maybe like sci-fi, right? It's one of those two things. They don't do anything else. Fine. So you take my game about cats, right? And you slap sci-fi on it. That's fine, right? And that's part of development where you kind of just make it right for the publisher, for the market, right? Like the market changes. Like maybe next year, Point Salad is going to be out. And maybe hidden information is going to be the biggest thing, right? So then, late stage in design, they start developing and they go, oh man, next year we're going to want to change a lot of this Point Salad stuff into more hidden point totals and a big reveal at the end, right? Because that's what's going to be hot next year. So you tweak things, and that's kind of the development process, is kind of making it right for the market and for the publisher. Yeah. Oh wait, did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, I was just asking if they were basically different iterations of the game throughout the 7-year design process.
Right.
I
No, I
mean, if
didn't
you,
answer your question.
Yeah, no, I don't want you to feel like you have to badmouth Gray Fox Games if they made you change something you didn't want to change or anything like that.
So basically, the big thing they wanted to do was create more incentive to buy the cards.
Oh,
Sure.
interesting.
Okay.
So after you've played the game 3, 4, 5 times, most of the time you're going to recognize, holy crap, these cards make the game so much better. I can survive combats. I can repair from a sacking way easier. Like, I've got these systems in place. Like, I can make this one action go much farther so that not after every combat I'm struggling to just like get resources again. Right? Your first few plays, if you don't buy those cards, hey, you're struggling, man.
Yeah, like how do you do it all, right?
But if you engage with that system, with the cards, the buildings and the refugees, suddenly you're much more capable of handling larger attacks. You can repair easier if you fail. Like, it kind of builds up your tableau in this way that really makes you much more resilient and powerful. But the first time you play the game, you focus more on the combat.
Yeah, that's the big pull.
Right. So you go, okay, well, great. I'm gonna hire some mercenaries. I'm gonna get 5 extra troops because I don't realize, that food is a precious resource. I'm gonna like focus on that. But then, oof, man, I got hit. Okay, good. Now I have to rebuild. Okay. And then you like never engage with the cards because you don't have that extra time
Right.
or resources to do so, because you never did it. So then you can't do it because then you're struggling to catch up. So they were like, okay, we need to make a way where that first time you play, without the knowledge that they are that important, you can't just say it in the rule book, hey, these are important, buy them.
Yeah.
Right? The person has to be drawn to them. So we kind of did somewhat of a major change where we added the in-game value to the cards as part of their benefit.
I'd say that's pretty significant.
Whereas before, it was just like, these cards are good, you should buy them.
Oh yeah, it definitely affects my gameplay. Sometimes I buy those cards at the end game just to get those extra points. I mean, that's a different reason than what you're saying, but it's definitely a factor that affects it.
It had some other cool benefits like that, where, previously it was like, hey, the last couple of rounds, you're not going to buy any cards.
Right, your engine's already built.
But now that they have those point values on them, sometimes you do.
Sometimes I actually buy them more in the late game because if the card flips don't mesh with how you play and you don't buy them early game, but at the end game you do, that can have a big effect.
Yeah, I'll take 2 points and
Yeah.
And some resources. Great, that sounds awesome. Yeah, totally. So that was the major change. And another big change was income. So it used to be more static. It was 5 gold per turn, every player all the time.
Oh yeah, that's a big difference for sure.
Turns out an extra set of eyes really helps.
That's really interesting, the change to the income, because I like to fast track getting my castle to stone as quickly as possible. But with income, sometimes it's worth it to pop down a few wooden turrets just to get more gold each round.
We tried a few different things out, but we were pretty happy with where that ended, where it's like, yeah, you should build your castle, man.
Okay, another question. What's it like co-designing a game? Did you guys butt heads a lot? Was it nice to have a sounding board, or how was it?
So Ryan and I have been buddies for a long time. We played Magic the Gathering together when we were wait tables together back in the day. We're like, you're a nerd, I'm a nerd. And then eventually, he came up with the idea because he knew that I had worked on that first game, which is like 11 years ago now. And I did a totally failed, horrible Kickstarter for it back in the day. It was like the first couple of years of Kickstarter, and I didn't know what the heck I was doing. Anyway, it failed. And he's like, hey, you have run a game store. You're a nerd. And you've tried to make a game before. Do you want to work on this thing with me that I've been thinking about? I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome, because you're my buddy, and it sounds like a cool idea. So in that was the only way that I had ever thought of game design, was as a collaborative process. Now that I'm a little bit more in that world, I am working on some things on my own, but at the time I was like, I'm like, of course you could do it on your own, but why would you? Just having Ryan there as a sounding board, as a co-creator of what's going on, as someone who comes with ideas and solutions to problems, like design is this process of like solving problems. You're like, here's the vision, and we want to keep that in mind. How do we get there? And you go, okay. Oh, here's a big wall. Okay, what about this? Nope, the wall's still over there. Okay, what if we go this way? Nope, the wall's still over there. How long is this wall?
Right.
If you're doing that on your own, right, it's the Great Wall of China. Like, it never ends. You can never get around it. If you have a co-designer, it's different than a playtester. A co-designer has a little more like meat to what they're saying because they understand all the systems much more fully and completely, and so they understand the ramifications of what they're doing, and they have more insight into why you would or wouldn't want to do a different thing. So having that collaborative process really helps you get somewhere that you want to go much faster than on your own.
To piggyback off of what you were saying about some other projects, is there anything at all you've released about what you're working on in the future? I know, for example, on your website you mentioned there's a not so secret expansion you're working on.
Yeah, so for the expansion, I know. So Josh is the lead developer over there, and he he's like, just don't say anything we can't take back, because you never know.
Okay.
You never know what's going to change between now and the final, because we're still designing it, and then there's development. Some things might get lopped off, some things might get introduced. We don't really know where it's going to end up. We have a vision, but that might have to modify too. But what I will say is what will probably end up being a part of the expansion is kind of a dual expansion. You got A and you got B. Some people are going to love A and not really care for B, and some people are going to love B and not really care for A. And that's why we separated them, right? So you can just get the content that you're more excited about.
So it's modular.
Right. Some people will want all of it, and they'll get all of it, and that's fine too.
And can you play both together, A and B, if you wanted to?
And you can play both together.
Yeah, some games don't play well with all of their expansions. In fact, Everdell, it's one of the suggestions not to play with all the expansions. Though the designers have said you can play with all of them, it's just going to be a little overwhelming, especially for new players.
Right. So, like, for example, that's going to be true for us. Like, if this is your first game, don't play with both expansions.
No.
In fact, probably don't play with either one.
Yeah.
Just learn the game and then go, oh, okay, this is what would be more interesting content for me to add, and then add that, when you're ready for it. The combat's already complex enough.
Any projected ballpark of release date?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. Maybe, I'm assuming they'll do some sort of crowdfunding next year.
Okay.
And then, of course, it would actually be released like a year after that, because that's how these things work. But do you want a little more detail on what we're working on?
As much as you can give without you getting in trouble.
So we probably will have knights. And they are mounted, and they ride around the battlefield, wreaking havoc.
They're the invaders? Or
No.
Yours.
Okay, cool.
And they charge out into the field, and they ride around, and they're just awesome. So what we've added to the combat is not just a new little subset of a phase, but also combat is happening in the fields.
That's cool, because right now, you can have your troops in your courtyard, on your walls, and now you can deploy them out into the fields.
Which allows you to think about protecting those farms in a way that is different.
I like that.
Right.
It fits perfectly in. It's not being, forced in where it doesn't belong. I never even realized, hey, there's troops here and here. Why are there not troops out there? So it fits perfectly.
Right.
Like, that's awesome.
Combat's already tough enough for people to kind of get to start with, where you don't want to start learning the game with a much more complex system, right? So you want to start where it's at, because it's already kind of at the top end of what a lot of people are at. But then once you learn it, and you're like, okay, this makes a lot of sense, and I can just kind of do it on my own. It's no big deal. I don't have to have somebody read me the next steps every time. Then you go, okay, now I'm ready to think about, oh, should I put knights in the field? Should I go out there and start, clashing swords, out there? Should I protect that farm? Like, then those considerations will be much more integrated and less overwhelming.
To piggyback off of what I was just saying. So I was looking on your website, and it says that there are other games as well. Can you share that are in the work? Can you share anything about those at all? The other things that are kind of cooking.
Yeah. So Ryan and I have like 18 games that we're theoretically working on together. Realistically, it's about 6 that we're actually have put much time into. There's another game that was supposed to come out this year, which obviously the industry turned upside down, just like everything else last year. And so that kind of got put on hold, and we're still trying to figure out where that's at, if that kind of fell through or if that's still happening. We're kind of waiting to find out on that one. Totally different kind of game. That's or at least the working title was Mountain God's Revenge, and you control these elementals, and you slide down the mountain, fighting off the sea gods' little stone golems attacking you, because they like to eat mountains. So they like come up and attack the mountain.
That's cool.
And he sends down Lahar, flood, lava, avalanche. He sends them, and rock slide. He sends them down, and each player controls one of those on behalf of the mountain god to take out these little rock golems, and you try to do the best job of that.
That sounds interesting.
Cool. I can dig it.
Is that with Gray Fox as well, or is that somewhere else?
That was somewhere else, but again, we're kind of waiting to see where that's going, if that's happening. It was supposed to happen. Now I don't know.
Yeah.
And then I've got a new project I'm working on that I'm really excited about, that I can't say a lot about. It is my first IP that I'd be working on. It's not as big as Star Wars, but it's a really cool video game IP, and I'm working as like contract design, and it's on my own, and I'm really having fun with it. Although, I do definitely miss having that, like, hey, I'm stuck here, what do you think? But at the same time, it is easier and faster to iterate on your own, because you don't have to wait until you can meet with that person and do that kind of thing. So it's a little tougher, but at the same time, you don't have to, check in with anybody else.
Yeah.
Little positive, little negative. Ultimately, I like doing stuff with people, so I like that better. But this has been a lot of fun, and I'm really excited to. I don't know. I really geek out on how do you express thematic involvement into a mechanics system.
Right.
How do you use mechanical systems to express thematics?
Right. Absolutely.
So like the gold track for After the Empires, like you're like, well, yeah, if you have more gold, they attack you.
Right.
If you, like, it's just like that kind of thing where, when you're playing the game, it should just make sense. Where you're like, yeah, of course that works that way. Why would it work any other way? But when you're designing a game, or potentially when you're playing a game, you might see some things where you're like, why would they do that? That doesn't make any sense. What does this mean? Like, what is this piece that I'm putting over here? Why am I putting it over there? What does that do?
Right.
So the puzzle of figuring out how to marry, the thematics and the mechanics, and creating mechanics that express the thematics, is just a lot of fun.
Do you have any other questions? That was my last question.
No, you answered everything
that
we've had questions about.
Thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate it. And definitely from here on out, I mean, already I bought your first game, but all your future things, you can guarantee we will be backing them or purchasing them if they're going to retail, whichever's happening first. And I'm excited to see what else is coming. I mean, the more I talk to you, the more I realize this is really your first release. It's amazing for a first game. Yeah, so congratulations. We're just two random guys from Louisiana, and our appreciation doesn't mean that much.
No, I love it, man. That's great.
Well, thanks so much for being here. Is there anything else you wanted to say to people watching? If not, that's fine.
Gosh, I mean, just frankly, being in the same conversation with a game like Everdell, that's incredible. I think, like, Everdell's a huge game. It's a great game. So, even just like being compared at all is like, that's incredible. So thanks for having us on your show,
Cool. Well, hopefully we'll still be around whenever your next game comes out, and maybe we'll have you on again. Board Game Battle.